Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and today is the 10th of October. And yes, it is a little bit dark in here this morning. The sun is now coming up later and later. Good morning, Alex. And good morning, Melissa. This is it's definitely, actually today's my nephew's birthday. I have to make sure that I reach out to him today. And today, I was thinking I was going to have kind of a day off today, but then I'm like, no, wait, I've got papers to grade for my university class. Good morning, Joanne. And so I have, so I've got that to do, and I've got a podcast to record for next week as well. So I'm going to work on that this morning and some other things. Good afternoon, Sam. And so anyway, I have, it's a very beautiful morning here. Just nice and quiet, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just sort of was admiring things this morning. I did have an Azrael message this morning, which was rather interesting because he's basically like saying, how did he put it? There's there's a harvest. I'm coming to visit. There's going to be a harvest, and of course, when we know what kind of an angel he is, we're just kind of like, okay. It just seems like there's more people leaving the earth at this point in time. Writing an essay currently about how Batman Bruce Wayne is both the hero and shadow archetypes. Wish me luck. Oh, good luck. Actually, that's an interesting topic, and I think you'll find good, you'll have ample evidence for that, I think, is what we would say. So that sounds really cool. I had a dream of a sickle last night. Oh, really? Interesting. Sickles have a lot to do with, I don't know, symbolically, everybody's dreams. And good morning, Suda. Okay, I see it drawn there too. Sickles sometimes have to do, obviously we think of the crescent moon with the sickle, but we also think of like goddess Kali holding the sickle in her hand. A lot of times, that's interesting because the sickle has to do with harvest. That's probably why you're mentioning it to me. Yeah, there's something about harvest. I had a dream about the rune Laguz last night, which looks almost like it's kind of like a, I have it actually in here someplace if I can find it. I have to see which one it is, but it just basically looks like a little. It's like a thing with a little. I don't know why I can't find the word for it this morning, but yeah, there's just kind of looking through here to see which one it is, because I also gotten the rune Dagaz, which is about the 180 degree turn. But it was weird. I'd just done the reading, and then all of a sudden, there was ambulances. I was like, whoops, that sounds kind of, there's Laguz. This is the rune I dreamt of last night. Good morning, Pat. So it was just like I was looking at something, and it turned into Laguz. Laguz is actually a rune of the moon, and he did mention something also about the moons this month. I was about to look up, and I didn't get a chance to just before the live stream. Oh, wow, yeah. I didn't get a chance, but I know Pluto is going direct very, very soon. I didn't see it in some of the astrologers I follow, I didn't see it mentioned today, but I could swear it was around today that Pluto was going direct. So that may be another thing as well. It's making its final pass out of Capricorn, heading towards Aquarius. So yeah, and we think about it, it doesn't sound very monumental when you talk about it that way, but I think it is actually a very monumental thing. Because, when we talk about death, we could be talking about it literally or figuratively. So, I had a dream about a mesmerizing meteor shower. Yeah, that's interesting too. It's interesting. Everybody's having all of these kinds of omen-type dreams, and you were saying, tomorrow, UK time. Oh, okay. Oh, Sam, you're talking about the Pluto going direct. Okay, so it might be, if that's UK time, it might be slightly earlier today. You didn't dream last night. It's okay, Joanne. It's maybe you'll dream tonight. Who knows? I mean, it's interesting. One of the things I was thinking about, just different conversations I've had, probably with many of you over this month so far, is that sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, they're saying there's a lot of this big change coming. I don't quite see it, and it's like. And it's almost like, it feels like so much time has elapsed every single day that you almost feel like all this stuff should have happened already. Like, every day feels like a lifetime lately. I don't know if it feels that way to other people, but it just seems like I don't know. It's not necessarily that there's a whole lot going on, but there just seems to be a whole lot going on in us that makes it that way. Same here, didn't remember. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting that some of us had these. So true. Yeah, it just feels like it's, I don't know, like, yeah, like we've been talking about this for so long that we feel like it should be here already, you know? But actually, that's actually a really good segue to the ghost story that I have for today. Well, it's really a spooky story more than a ghost story, but I decided to choose a scary story. So I'm going to read this one for you. It's called Bess. It says, John Nicholas raised horses. He had many horses of all kinds, but his favorite was Bess, a gentle old mare he had grown up with. He no longer rode her, for all she could do now was just amble along. Bess spent her days grazing peacefully in a meadow. That summer, for the fun of it, John Nicholas went into a fortune-teller's booth. The fortune-teller studied her cards. I see danger ahead of you, she said. How stereotypical. Your father's favorite horse will cause you to die. I don't know when, but it will happen. It's in the cards. Which, I don't know how you would read that in the cards. But anyway, let's suspend disbelief here. John Nicholas laughed. The idea that Bess would cause his death was nonsense. She was as dangerous as a bowl of soup. Yet from then on, whenever he saw her, he remembered the fortune-teller's warning. Then that fall, a farmer from the other end of the county asked if he could have Bess. He had been thinking the old horse would be perfect for his children to ride. That's a good idea, John said. It would be fun for them, and it would give Bess something to do. Later, John told his wife about it. Now Bess won't kill me, he said, and they both laughed. A few months later, he saw the farmer who had taken her. How's my Bess, he said. Oh, she was fine for a while, the farmer said. The children loved her. Then she got sick. I had to shoot her to put her out of her misery. It was a shame. Despite himself, John breathed a sigh of relief. He had often wondered if in some crazy way, through some strange accident, Bess would kill him. Now, of course, she could not. I'd like to see her, said John, just to say goodbye. She was my favorite. The bones of the dead horse were in a far corner of the man's farm. John kneeled down and patted Bess's sun-bleached skull. Just then a rattlesnake, which had made its home inside the skull, sank its fangs into John Nicholas's arm and killed him. Interesting, right? It's so yeah. So this is the story. There's another one too that was quite. Speaking of what I had seen this morning, this was another one that I was looking at. Yeah, this is a very short one. It's like 2 paragraphs. It's called The Appointment, and there's many versions of this. So the 16-year-old boy worked on his grandfather's horse farm. One morning he drove a pickup truck into town on an errand. While he was walking along the main street, he saw Death. Death beckoned to him. The boy drove back to the farm as fast as he could and told his grandfather what happened. Give me the truck, he begged. I'll go to the city. He'll never find me there. His grandfather gave him the truck, and the boy sped away. After he left, grandfather went into town looking for Death. When he found him, he said, Why did you frighten my grandson this way? He's only 16. He's too young to die. I'm sorry about that, said Death. I didn't mean to beckon to him. But I was surprised to see him here. You see, I have an appointment with him this afternoon in the city. Fortune-teller was right, kind of. Well, she was right. It goes to show you too, like when we when we see things. The one thing I can say about that is that sometimes when if you have a psychic vision of something, and the vision doesn't seem to make any sense, or it just has some association with it, like okay, something death associated with horse in some way. Let's just say that somebody was able to pick up on something like that. It's not, we might be thinking of it in a very more literal sense, like, he's gonna have a fall off his horse and have an accident, right? But that's not, it's just connected to it is connected to the horse, sort of, yeah. And then with the other one, what I think is interesting about The Appointment is the way in which, it almost reminds me of the story of Oedipus, in the sense that when there's a prophecy about him killing his father and marrying his mother, first of all, the parents get the prophecy, so they expose him. They leave him out. They pin his feet, which is why he's called Oedipus, swollen foot. And a shepherd takes pity on him, takes him to a neighboring town. When somebody kind of hints during a drunken party that, hey, those aren't really your parents, he decides to go to the oracle himself, and the oracle tells him the same thing. And he's so horrified, he's like, I'm not going to let this fate happen. I'm going to go, I'm leaving town. And because he's not going to do this to his parents. But what ends up happening along the way is he gets into this like chariot rage accident or whatever. This is, ancient Greece or whatever. Yeah, because he's heading towards Thebes. And he ends up killing the man who is his father. And when he gets to town, he answers the riddle of the Sphinx. The Sphinx goes away. And he's now a hero because he's rescued the town from the Sphinx, and they give him the queen as his bride, who actually he doesn't realize is his own mother. So the point being is just that sometimes when we learn about the future or we see a future event, and particularly in this case where it has to do with something that is very that is ultimate. And it's one of the reasons too, like, well, I personally, okay, I don't know that one can ever see the time of death in the cards. Azrael has told me that. He's like, you can't, there can be hints around the fact that it's not far off for somebody, especially we're talking about somebody who's very, very old. But you can't, but the exact moment is not necessarily going to be known. Okay, it's very rare. Oftentimes you'll hear about people having experiences like at the moment of death, like seeing like their grandmother at the end of their bed or something like that, standing there. So, and then they'll say, oh, I saw grandma. And they'll be like, well, you couldn't have seen grandma because she just died. Like, it's that kind of a thing. So, yeah, but it's the idea is just that it's like Azrael said a long time ago, there's certain things you can control and certain things you can't control. And it's very interesting, like if you had a premonition to say, oh, okay, I'm going to side, or you got a premonition of an awful fate, the way in which we think we can make decisions to sidestep it, but there's some things that we, for whatever reason, can't sidestep. And which is why a lot of the times, which again gets back to the whole issue of mental control of everything, the fact that we feel that with our consciousness, we are the master of our fate. We can alter things. And we are the master of our fate to a certain degree. But there may be other aspects of our fate that are not in our hands. And or aspects of what's going on with our soul that may not be in our hands. And those things are really mysterious because even if somebody could see them, it's like, well, how do you interpret that? How do you know how that's going to play out for you? So anyway, that was, those are my little stories for today. I keep trying to think, I'm like, I know I have a ton of other stories, like from personal experience, but a lot of times they're just little things. They're not enough to really make a story per se. So, and some of them I may have told already just in other contexts, so I don't want to be boring and repetitious, but, so, I don't know. So anyway, I'll have to I'll see what comes up in that area. So, okay, so today, and Joanne had this message, I'm sorry I didn't read this. We're talking about dreams, I think. They've been so weird, I fell asleep to the movie War of the Worlds the other night. I woke up feeling disconnected and felt that way all week. Yeah, it's interesting. Movies can really do that to you, I think. One of the reasons, and I know we've talked about this here before, I'm careful about what I watch on movies or TV, if you watch certain things, it sometimes messes with your head. You know what I mean? I don't know, like I find that if I've watched a movie that makes a very strong impression, it's what I've said about art, actually, and the way in which art because it works through symbol. And I consider movies to be they potentially can be a kind of art. I mean, there's some movies that are very, I don't know, I think even the ones that are, where they leave nothing to the imagination, let's put it that way, and I don't care for movies like that. Excuse me. When movies don't leave things to the imagination, and so they kind of, everything's kind of right in front of you, all the action happens, there's nothing you figure out or have to guess or anything. I find that those movies can make an impact too, but if it's something that I feel, I don't know, depending on what it is and how it's done, I find myself, I don't know, I can sometimes find myself impacted in the wrong way. Like if I feel like there's something about it, I don't know, it's kind of like going through, okay, it reminds me a little bit, there's a place in Wisconsin, okay, known as the House on the Rock. And I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's really funny. I remember watching a Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode. It was called The Creeping Terror. And it's an absolutely hilarious episode. And I think I've talked about it before. It's one of my favorites of theirs because the movie is just so poor. It is so absolutely, utterly poor. It's supposed to be like an outer space creature that comes to, digests humans. And it's hilarious, though. It's like there's nothing scary about it whatsoever. And it's absolutely hysterical. But they, you know how they always do the background commentary in that, and in the beginning of the movie, when the couple who are kind of the main characters come back from their honeymoon to this, you know, and he's the he's the nephew of the sheriff or something, and it's just kind of like, they're like, yeah, creeping nepotism, you know, but they go out to find this thing, and so she starts talking about the honeymoon, and she brings up a black cat just literally walked in front of my house. I have not seen that before. I know that this cat lives on the other end of the street, but this kitty has just walked in front of my house. That is such good luck. We've just had a black cat cross my house path, so that's a really, really good omen. So anyway, sorry, that just caught my attention. But the House on the Rock is a really, if anybody's ever been there, I remember when I was going out to Wisconsin back in the late 80s, my parents and I were going there because I was looking at colleges at that time. We need to name it. That's it. The cat probably has a name, but I mean, we can give it our own name, sure, too. Sure, absolutely. There's no reason why not, you know? I found the cave cricket in the basement, and of course all cave crickets are named Fred, whether they're male or female. So so I found another one of those downstairs. So yeah, why not name the neighborhood cat? It's a real cutie. But the House on the Rock is it's a museum. It's like never been there, but saw a video of the place on Instagram. It is a sensory overload, because you walk in, because there's the house itself that's built. And I can't remember the name of the architect. People always want to think of it as like a Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's not like it's not one of his. It's another architect. And the house itself looks very cool and looks very peaceful. It is. You can look down, you can see the water under it and everything. But there's a museum attached to it with one of the world's largest carousels that has like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse on top of it. And it's like, and then it's just these rooms and rooms of museums. Like, you literally could not stop and look at every single thing in it. And they have these weird, like, planters, or at least they did, out in front that looked almost like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It was just really, it's a really creepy place. And I remember I had nightmares for a long time. And by the way, that was at a time I was already reading cards, already into like, witchy stuff and things like that at that point in time. I was just like, oh my God, this place is terrifying. And I still, whenever I think about it, I have like this just very uneasy vibe every time I think about the House on the Rock. And, and it's funny, my parents, I think, must have gotten the video of it, but the video is just even like, I don't know, the way the video is, I'm like juxtaposed against the way the place is just, there's also something that just feels off about it. There's just sometimes the movie, I guess the point being is that sometimes these things can just make us feel off, but that's the kind of impact that things have on our psyches. And this is why oftentimes working through image or symbol or story in a different way, rather than just somebody sitting down and explaining something to you rationally, has more of an impact. Actually, it does make me think about the fact that when we talk about things rationally, rational discourse in a way is a kind of a defense, if you think about it. Because when we see something that terrifies us, what do? Well, let's explain it. Let's be grounded and practical, and let's explain it. Let's not get carried away, right? It's something that can ground us. And and many times our intellect, we see something, we've mistaken what we've seen, and it's like, oh, okay, that's all that is. But but the intellect is almost like a defense that we have against the numinous, and but we can sometimes use those defenses to the point that we stick our head in the sand and say, oh no, yes, this thing happened in front of me, but I'm sure it was nothing. I'm sure it has no meaning. I'm sure there's nothing. Oh, that was just a dream. I just ate too much of something last night. There's ways in which we we can use the intellect to distance ourselves from something. And again, the situation is that sometimes the intellect is... sometimes the intellect is right. Sometimes we are making a mountain out of a molehill, to use a metaphor. But other times it's just a way of us kind of, trying to retain control when we've seen something that does change the narrative, or that does unsettle us in some way. Whether it be a dream, or whether it be some kind of anomalous phenomenon, or like we had in today's stories, where you could have something where you learn something, like you go for a reading with somebody and you get a piece of information and you go, that's nonsense. That's actually the most interesting time, by the way, with readings. And I was going to actually do some readings today because I didn't have a particular topic. We're kind of sliding into this one. But it's interesting because if you have a reading with somebody and they tell you something and you just think, that's never going to happen. That's just not going to happen. It's just, you logically you're saying, what this person is telling me is impossible, or I don't see how that's going to come together, or I don't see how this person thinks this way, or I don't have, whatever it is. And then when it actually does happen, then you're just kind of like, okay, it makes you think differently about it, because it also raises the question too of like, how does a tarot reader know? How would a tarot reader know? Well, the answer is a lot of times that we don't really know. But like for me, I'm just telling you what the cards say. Sometimes I do get a very strong impression of something and I'll have to say what it is. But when you read the cards, a lot of times I use them mainly to see what's going on with you right now. Like what is it that maybe is unconscious to you, again, through symbol that you might be able to bring, to the light of day, something that you can actually see. But sometimes you do pick up on something with the future. But Alex says, absolutely. Even with my dream last night, I was trying to think if I'd seen anything with the image of my dream. Nothing I could think of, but you try to rationalize. Yeah, and that's just it. That's our first instinct when it comes to stuff. Which is why when I read about studies where they say, oh, we interviewed a bunch of people with active imagination and we put them in a room they told was haunted and they all thought that they had experiences. That means that means there's this. They're trying to make this correlation between active imagination and seeing ghosts. Now you can have people, and there are people out there. I remember it was I had the book that Jason and Grant from Ghost Hunters. They had a couple of books out initially when the show was a little more credible. I don't know. I think there's those ghost hunting shows. That's a whole separate subject. I remember talking with Dustin Perry, who was from that show, because I was on a ghost hunt in Clinton here. Where he came, Chris Williams came. Tell me how my tarot cards wanted me to read them last night. Well, that's actually maybe more like your spirit guides telling you, we have a message for you, pick these up and do them. That happens to me quite a lot, actually, where I'll be doing something and I'll stare at a deck and I'm like, oh, I need to do something with those. Yeah, this is just because as you're opening up your intuition more, you're listening to, well, it could be your spirit guides, and it can also just be your inner voice trying to say, hey, I'm trying to say something, here's a way that I might be able to express it to you. Especially if they think that that's maybe the easiest way to get a message across, or if we feel like we're not getting the message at all. But tarot with time, it goes, a lot of it goes, if you want to look at it more, if you want to look at it outside of the spirits telling you the future kind of thing, which I don't think is always the case. I think it's more of a case of, it's kind of like what Jung had talked about with regard to the collective unconscious. And he thinks cards work through this principle of synchronicity, where there's a meaningful coincidence, but again, the symbol of it has the impact on the psyche. It can, it moves things, it allows things to change. Sorry, I feel like I'm about to cough, and maybe there's an omen in that too. But one of the features of the collective unconscious is that it's outside of time. The collective is not a part of your brain. Okay, it's not. You can't say, oh, here's where the collective unconscious is located in your brain. There's not. Actually, Jung wouldn't locate consciousness in the brain at all. Because then that indicates that consciousness is a byproduct of an organ, and it's not. The idea is that the organ is what helps us to process that consciousness. Not just our brain, but our spinal cord, our nervous system, that whole thing is the way in which we process, and it also filters out things that might be overwhelming to us, that may make us unable to function in the world, right? But the collective is a space, this is the space where myth exists. This is the space of dreams. Jung has said that myths are the dreams of the collective, basically. And so when you're dealing with the collective, you're in a space where that there is no time. It's almost like a field that is that is outside of this. So if somebody can read and if they can tap into imagery from the collective, they're it's not that, oh, you know, and that may also be a reason why it's a hard for readers to determine time. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can get a lock on something. But a lot of times it's difficult because you're operating in the field of the collective. And so you're really, when you're reading cards, it's almost like you're having a dream with the cards in a way. You know, there's images and symbols that are telling you about something that's going on. And sometimes because you're dealing with a space that's outside of time, you do get something that is in the future, rather than something that is, you know, rather than just being able to see the present, or maybe just being able to see what we think of as the past. Those things don't really have any meaning in the collective. So it's just going to be information about what you need, or maybe even just about where you're headed. So yeah, so that's certainly the psychoanalytic theory. Jung does have an essay on this, one of his essays on synchronicity, and I believe he talks more about astrology than he does about tarot cards, because he looks at astrological charts and he actually kind of does a study of them with regard to the people that they are attached to, in terms of suggesting that astrology somehow works through synchronicity as well. So anyway, interesting thing to potentially look up what Jung says on synchronicity. But synchronicity's been studied quite a lot. There's quite a bit about it. Those of you who were in last night's class and discussion, Joanna talked about the trickster. And she talked about the way in which, she talked about Baba Yaga as a trickster, and mentioning the fact that there are no female tricksters generally. We don't see them. We only see tricksters as male. And now Jung has a whole essay on the trickster. And that essay, and he talks about it as a psychologism. He says that it's one of the oldest aspects of our consciousness is the trickster, because the trickster has to do with the reality of how life is, how we negotiate it. Because the trickster is the way in which we go along and our mind starts to make an association. I do A, then B happens, right? We start drawing things. We have these causal kinds of connections that we draw. But the trickster comes in and messes all that up. And the trickster is actually the catalyst for any kind of a change, too. I love trickster. That's my last essay. I want to explore the trickster as the oracle. Yeah, that's interesting. And so it's like, it is an archetype, yes. It's not even just like it. It is it. It is, the trickster is one of the oldest archetypes. And it is a very clumsy one, as she said. Sometimes the trickster is like, it's like a god that's trying to take on a human or animal form, so it's like it has like a head and it's kind of clumsily like, you know, going around. That's why a lot of times clowns and jugglers and fools and things are associated with the trickster, because they don't act according to the social order. And sometimes their actions are humorous, but sometimes their actions are, but other times it's just, you know, you're going along doing your thing, you know, I have my plan, and they just come in and they mess everything up. It would be like if you organized everything and they went and they just kind of put everything out of order, and you get mad when they do that because you're like, I had it in order, I had it exactly the way I wanted it, and you just messed it up. And I'm talking about this more figuratively, but that's kind of what they do. I think that they were talking about if you have a day where, okay, you're getting up and you're getting in your car to drive to work, and it looks like it's going to be a nice day, but then all of a sudden it starts raining and you don't have an umbrella. And then all of a sudden there's a car accident, so now you're stuck in traffic, and you thought you were going to get to work, you know, early, and now you're going to be late, and then you would plan to make a stop, and now you can't do it. And then you get to work, and then there's a problem with the system, and blah, blah, blah. You know those days like that, you know? And you just get very frustrated because you just feel like you're trying to move ahead, and it just seems like everything is just like an obstacle. This is why sometimes the devil is often seen as a kind of trickster figure, because the devil, the word diablos, or even the word the Hebrew word Satan, has to do with one who obstructs your path. Okay, it has to do with the obstructionist who obstructs your path. And as I've pointed out, obstructing your path is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's because we're about to walk in and get eaten by the tiger, and the trickster's kind of like, no, go over this way instead, you know, trying to keep you away from it. I think the one example I always tend to use in my religion class when we talk about this image is I mention a friend of mine many years ago who I used to work with. His brother had been had lost his job and was now getting a have to be careful near my low-key altar. Yeah, well, low-key. Yeah, that's funny. It's always been funny how we always like to try to invite these kinds of elements into our life. It's like the people who go up to the guru and are like, mother, test me. And it's like, okay, like, why would you ask for that? But the, what was I saying about the trickster? It was very much, oh yeah, okay. So the story was this my friend's brother he had a job interview in New York City. And it was, but everything went wrong. He woke up, his alarm, he set it for the wrong time. He set it for like PM instead of AM. Your friend that you worked with. Yes, my friend that I worked with, this was his brother we're talking about. And then he got up late, and by the time he got to the train, he had just missed the train by 2 minutes. And he was like, this was like a potentially lucrative job. And so he just blew the interview because he didn't make it. Well, as it turns out, his brother was going for a job interview on September 11th, 2001, and it was supposed to be at the World Trade Center. Okay? Now, if he had gone in for that job interview, he might not be here today. Okay? So, the trickster sometimes works in a good way, is what I'm trying to say. It obstructs your path, and yeah, oh my god, yeah, exactly. You realize you dodged a bullet, I think is the phrase that we use. You've dodged a bullet. He makes himself known if I ignore him. He finds a place where there's no possible way to be there. That's my clue. He wants attention. Oh, okay. She's talking about her about Loki. Oh gosh. Yeah, exactly. And there's things like that. There's actually a biblical reference to, this is why when I tell people, when people talk about Satan, okay, my grandfather was a building manager there and he got sick. He was home when it happened. Yeah. And again, and it kind of almost circles back around to our story, right? If it's not your time, you're not going, you're not going to be in the place where your life could end. It doesn't feel all that random, it almost feels like there's a time, like when you read the stories of the Morai or the Fates, that there's an allotted time, or the Norns, the idea that there's some kind of an allotment there. And we try to say, no, that's nonsense. There's no such thing. We can all live forever, and science is going to change things, and we're never going to die. Well, true, human lifespans are getting longer and longer, but there still seems to be this mysterious idea that there's a time, and nobody goes before their time. When people die young, we say, oh, that's before their time. Well, that's because we think of somebody as having a certain lifespan. But I was saying about the book of Numbers, when I have one of those things, I just don't talk about it. It just weirds me out. One of those. Oh, okay. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, yeah, it's sometimes, yeah, there's just certain situations where you dodge it and you kind of go, wow, when you have the revelation, it's because you were not meant to walk into this, or you have the obstruction. So what I was saying about Numbers, there's a story about a man called Balaam, and I don't think he's not one of the Hebrews. He's not part of any of the Israelite tribes. He's not Jewish, and but he is sent by, I think, the Ammonite king to curse the Israelites, right? And so he's a sorcerer. So he's going to work his magic, and he's riding on his donkey. But one of the angels appears in front of the donkey with a flaming sword. Okay, now we don't say, but this angel is described as a Satan. Okay, and this is my point. Unlike Satan is a role, it's not a being. It's a biblical role. And the donkey, of course, shies back, and the man can't see this angel, so he keeps beating his donkey. And after this happens for the third time, the donkey actually gets a voice and says to him, "Why are you stop beating me?" And he's like, "Well, why won't you let me move ahead?" And then the angel appears to him. The Satan appears to him and says, "No, you are not going to go curse them. You're going to go back and you're going to bless them instead. And this is what you're going to tell the king." So the angels, in other words, they're saying this action is not going to happen. So the role of the Satan there is actually to obstruct, to stop something from happening that potentially that's unfortunate or negative, or just something that's not supposed to happen. We have this kind of a thing, and it's funny. Oh, my neighbor's now walking with his two little Shih Tzus, which are very cute. Avoided death. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know, Joanne. No, I knew that's what you meant, Joanne, when you said that you had had kind of a close brush, and that is always very, very scary when we think back on it and we think, wow, what could have happened there. But yes, sometimes we have the intention to be in a certain place and time, and we think that we didn't get there. The obstacle was put in front of us. We're frustrated. We failed, but you didn't fail, actually. Teddy bear dogs. Yes. Oh, yeah. She's talking about that. Yeah, they are. And him and his wife always dress them up in these cute little outfits. I'm sure they have their sweaters on right now. They're very, very spoiled dogs, but they're very cute. They're very sweet. So anyway, it's just interesting how that works. It's funny how we've gotten into this discussion. Too much for me to wrap my head around with that. Well, and you know what? That's a good point, Joanne, because this is the kind of thing that is really hard to wrap your mind around. And I think that's a lot of times why we have our rational mind, where we have other things that can ground us. Part of grounding is just having our defenses against that which is too much to contemplate. You know what I mean? It's about, it's a protection for us. When we always, it's funny how we say grounding and protecting in the same sentence when we do intuitive work, right? And so yeah, it's interesting, and it's not the kind of thing, when we've done things, it's not that we have to necessarily sit and spend our time cogitating on it. I'm one of those weird people who cogitates on things like this all the time, but I don't know. That's just been me my whole life. As I've told people, I said, if I was to go sit at the bar and someone was to strike up a conversation with me, it would only be 5 minutes in that they'd move to the other end, because I'll start talking about like this kind of stuff, and they're just like, oh, look at the time, I have to go. Because for a lot of people, because it can be a very uncomfortable subject at times. It's a fascinating subject. Haha, me too. Yeah, exactly. I just. It's like, so what are you interested in? And I'm like, well, I'm interested in death studies. Oh, really? They kind of get, it's not, there's been studies, there was Kastenberg, I think, who did I think I had, in my book, I think I used his 3rd edition of his. He does these regular surveys of people's attitudes towards death. And he kind of goes the range, from older people who are maybe on the verge of death to young people. Okay, who may not be thinking about it at all. And his survey is rather interesting. I know I quoted a bit in my book, but yeah, it's not generally a subject that people want to think about. And but of course, we're getting near Halloween, where this kind of thing is kind of talked about, and this idea of time. And I've had I've had dreams like that. Yes, especially when you look back at how events played out, it's like I had no control. Everything I tried to do to counteract the situation failed. I was not meant to be there that day. Yeah, and that's a perfect example. And it shows you that in the underlying scheme of things, not that we have no control, but we have very little control. And that's why I think a lot of times the spirit messages are like, just yield control. Because, you're going to be steered where you need to go. You're not going to be steered deliberately into danger. You're going to be steered, where you need to go. Indeed, and if you that's why sometimes when we have this determination, like, no, I'm gonna be tough and I'm gonna push through, that sometimes is not the way to go. Sometimes if the universe pushes back, indeed, my job change. Oh yeah, like with that kind of a thing. And sometimes the change, we, even if we think it's something that we didn't want, sometimes it just proves to be. It puts us in a place that we have very much, it takes us out of our comfort zone a little bit, and we may end up in a new place where we say, oh, you know what, maybe this is better than the place that I was. Or, oh, it could have been so much worse if I'd been in that place. So let's look at our reading for today. Our middle card is Isolation, 3 of Swords. And it's interesting because I had pulled some runes earlier for myself, and I was getting runes of separation, okay, like separating paths. But Isolation, I think, as you can see, this is a figure who is weeping, is kind of breaking out of the ice. So this is almost the idea of emotional release. And that's really, I think, what the 3 of Swords is about. The 3 of Swords a lot of times is seen as a card of, like, breakups or separations or losses. And we are talking about loss, right? But this is the way in which, as we lose things, whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be literal death. It can just be other things that we lose, or relationships that go away, or people that come in and out of our lives, and the way in which we heal from it through tears. We heal through it. Heart opening usually, as many of you know, is kind of like a purgation. It's like it's something that comes out of you because you're not holding it down in yourself anymore. So this indicates a process of healing for a lot of people, of healing from isolation or feeling alone. And the inner feeling of which we're unaware is the guidance card, which is the Three of Pentacles. But in this deck, this literally what we were just talking about. The idea is, like Sudha said earlier, hey, what's guiding me to go pick up my cards and use them? Well, it could be your own inner voice, and it could be your guides, okay? It could be both. But the idea is that we are being guided. In other words, we're not isolated. We're not alone. There is a guide, and we may not always be aware that they're there. The external feeling of which we are aware is the Nine of Wands, okay? And this is the card of exhaustion. This is the person, and as you can see, this is somebody in the middle. I think I think this came up in our intuitive development class, and I remember, I think it was Allie who was looking at the Rider-Waite Nine of Wands, and thinking she hadn't really quite picked up on the idea that this guy was wounded. But as you can see, this guy in the middle, it's like he's holding like a machine gun, and he looks almost like this kind of Rambo-ish type in the middle, because it's almost like we're just exhausted from fighting. We're exhausted from going through certain situations. We're aware of that, but there's kind of an internal reminder that we're not really alone, and that the track we're on, we're being taken to where we need to go. So we let go, right? Eight of Cups, letting go. It's the idea that we are, well, Rambo. I know, it's funny, right? But think about it. I mean, Rambo. If you think about those movies, he's a Vietnam vet, right? And he was He was a Green Beret, I guess, was what the premise is. And he's like he's definitely kind of I don't know. Then the kind of problems he gets into. I feel them, but I don't hear them. I wish they were clearer. Well, that's why they keep doing this to you. That's why they keep doing that to you, Pat. They're like, we just want to let you know. But you know what? But that also does raise a good point. Is that the guides are not. It doesn't always. Okay, I'm not saying it's impossible that it could happen this way, but I would say it's extraordinarily rare for them to come through as just saying, sitting down and saying, well, let me tell you about the thing that's coming up. Like, they don't work like that. They work through image, because that's the realm that they're from. They're working in this realm that's outside of time. So they work through image. Language is something that we use and that we privilege. I don't know, hearing them here makes me feel crazy sometimes. But you're not. Yeah, and I know, and I understand too, especially when you've got training in mental health, and, we're kind of like, oh gosh, kind of hearing, well, I mean, those voices I think are a little bit different, of course, but yeah, the way in which and that's it, because that's why I don't believe the idea that, only imaginative people hear these things. It's like, no, frequently we don't want to believe that. We don't want to know that maybe there's somebody else around telling us something necessarily. That can be unsettling to some people. They're like, no, I'd rather just believe I made this up in my head or whatever. Spark of inspiration sometimes out of nowhere. Well, yes, exactly. It doesn't have to always be a warning or a negative thing. And that's the way it is when we and that's why meditation is a thing. You empty your mind and you are, I'm delusional. I say 3 times a day, at least. Is what Joanne's saying here. The images, but damn, we have to figure out. Well, but that's what we're learning, and eventually you start to learn that language. You start to learn the language of your spirit guides. You start to learn the language of the unconscious. Now, our outcome card is interesting. It's the Nine of Cups. Now, the Nine of Cups we think of as a wish card, right? But this is the laziness card. And what this says to me is, we can be here. We can be very funny. We can be unhappy here, okay? We can hate where we are, but sometimes in our isolation, it's just kind of like it's like the little cocoon we put around ourselves. It's like we're hurting, but we feel safe there. And it's almost like this is saying, okay, you've gotten comfortable here. It's time to come out. All right? It's time to come out, but it's also time to kind of let go of things that we have maybe been defending for a long time. And just listen to what our guides are telling us, So it's a language that we're learning, and that's part of what intuitive development is. It's kind of, and this is why we play with different things, to see how that language can come through. Because, I mean, frequently we have guides that want to communicate with us. Yes, got to loosen the grip, exactly. And the first card I got from I have my Lenormand is the Rider, which is messages coming through, right? Messages coming in, and that's why meditation's advocated for, because that loosens the grip on the mind. Yeah, but unclear messages. Sounds like this one's for you, Pat, like when you were just talking about. Messages that are not clear. And then we have Clover, which is the unexpected that comes in, right? This is about the way in which something comes about, like, because we think of clovers, like 4-leaf clovers, as representing good luck, right? But there's this idea here of something that comes in out of the blue, and that's what it's saying. There are messages, things are happening. It's not clear right now. But what it's gonna be something that comes in, and we're gonna go, oh wow, it's that way in which things change for us very, very unexpectedly. And I think a lot of times, especially when we're doing readings, we think that we know what the future is going to be, and we think we know how it's going to go, but we don't know how it's going to go. That's kind of the thing. We don't know how it's going to go. We just have to trust that we're on the right path. And there are moments when we're uncomfortable and we don't like things, but sometimes that discomfort is there to push us into a new place. It's like the Grand Cross card that we saw the other day. Resistance is created to you so that you will take a different action. Because consciously you may think, yes, you know what, it's a very good thing, I should make this change. But, I really want to worry about this thing first, and, this is kind of fine, so, I'm not really ready to change that. And the thing is, if it's something that really needs to change in your life, then it will be changed for you. That's kind of the way it goes, So the decision we often have is, are we going to do it, or is the universe going to do it for us? And when the universe does it for us, we tend to view it as a tower moment. We tend to view it as a catastrophe, like, oh, some terrible, stroke of luck. But I think they want me to, this is Pat, I think they want me to get softer. They are so loving when they get through, it's almost unnoticeable. Maybe I'm too in your face. Or maybe we just expect that that's the way it's going to be. Yeah, like an epiphany moment. Yeah. It's, let's see, this is Joanne. Let's hope it includes all of us on a beach in Bora Bora, sipping drinks with cute attendants. Well, it's interesting. And it's funny you say that, because I was watching something that it was like some kind of commercial that was set in this like kind of tropical setting like that, or in this thing. And I'm just kind of like, I would prefer to be like somewhere up, like I said, I'd probably prefer to be like in, I don't know, in Southwest England somewhere rather than there. But it would be nice to have like, I'd like sit around a fire, and like be, sipping wine or hot toddies or something, People not in my vibration are just not in my path anymore. Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is what we mean about people falling away and kind of letting go. Yeah. So it's very much, so everything is, that's what we want. We all know what we want. And it's funny that you mentioned kind of sipping drinks somewhere, because that's kind of what this guy is doing. But it's kind of like, but it's kind of pushing us to move. So, but I love that too, the sexy men with Scottish accents. If you can understand them, whenever I've been in Scotland, and I'm pretty good actually with different regional accents throughout different parts of the UK. But in Scotland, a drunken Scotsman, there's just no, I'm like, I can't, I can't understand them. Come visit me. I'm close to the border. So I want to come visit you. That's totally where I want to be. I haven't been up that way in such a long time. I have friends in Scotland that I've thought about visiting. I've also thought about visiting Crowley's house, because I know the people who own it now. Aleister Crowley's house, since we were talking about him last time. But yes, field trip. Yes, as soon as I have some money to go abroad, let's all go to the UK. Yeah, that's home for me, really. That's really where I feel at home. I mean, yeah, I've lived here a long time and I'm used to being here, but UK is really more home for me. And it's funny because people say, oh, don't you want to live in Ireland? I'm like, I like Ireland, but yeah, UK, me, I want Crowley. Yeah, Boleskine House, they made a lot of progress on it. It really, because it burned down like God knows how many times, but they're restoring it. And I think it's Keith and Kira who own it. And yeah, I met Keith in London in 2019. And yeah, Keith's actually from Florida, of all places. Let's manifest that. I've always wanted to live there. Oh, well, that's what I've been trying to manifest for like more than 10 years now. But I've actually, It was really weird. One of my clients was over on the weekend, and she had said to me, she says, I just kind of got in my head that you're going to England, like, and moving there, like, really soon. And she goes, and then you're not going to be here anymore to do my sessions. So like, I'm kind of like, you know, from her mouth to God's ear, I mean, as they say, you know, I really hope so. Anyway, we're at 10 of, so I probably need to call this to a close. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I like the idea. Yeah. You know, or, you know, we could all just take a field trip and then some of us can just stay there, you know? I've often said to people there, I'm like, well, you know, you need to either adopt me or marry me or do something, you know, so that I can stay here. I think I'm too old to be adopted at this point, but, you are welcome. And, and anybody who took the class last night, I will have the video together, and Joanna was supposed to send me handouts, but she hasn't yet, so I gotta catch up with her on that. You guys are welcome, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. You're welcome, and we'll see you tomorrow morning, I'm pretty sure. So take care. Have a good one.